Good morning and welcome to the February edition of the Chair's Breakfast. I have a few announcements and then we'll start with Matt and zip around the room. Just a reminder, everybody, our public hearing series begins next Monday, the 24th, with the Select Board public hearing. On the 25th is the Planning Board public hearing. And then on March 9th and March 16th are the Finance Committee public hearings, all at 7 o'clock, all here in the Townhouse hearing room. Remind everyone our town election is March 31st. And I have two sort of public service announcements. As you know, we have a sister city, Nanai, in Japan. And the Concord Nanai Network is having an event, a sake tasting, to benefit the network at Vero Farm on March 20th at 6 p.m. I'm sure it will be a fun evening, and I would encourage folks to come out. Also, the Concord Historical Commission does annually preservation awards, and they've extended the deadline for applications to the awards to March 31st. So I want to make those announcements. And what happened to you?
Hockey.
So we'll go around the room. I was going to start with Matt, but you
I'm here.
stuck yourself in there.
Yeah,
so-
there I am. Dean Banfield on the Finance Committee. Finance Committee completed its guidelines process at the end of the year, issued guidelines, and we are now reviewing any of the warrant articles that have financial implications. So we're inviting in proponents and discussing amongst ourselves and leading up to our hearings that'll occur in March.
Thank you. Matt?
Matt Johnson with the Planning Board. We had a very successful public forum about reimagining the Thorough Depot District, where we had the public go to different stations and look at what their visual preferences would be for rebuilding in the area, what kinds of concerns or opportunities there were for transit or connection within the district, and then finally, the uses that they'd like to see in the area. And so as the MAPC consultant, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council consultant said, the objective of this grant that they're working through is to determine whether we need to make any zoning changes there to encourage these types of changes. So that's what would be the outcome of this, and that wouldn't come until next year's town meeting. Yeah.
Any big takeaways from that?
Certainly that intersection next to Starbucks is a hot spot. I think that's not a revelation. And then that the building styles, I think that the public tends to be wanting to preserve the style of the area as is. Some of course, there's important structures like the depot and some of the buildings that are further down Thorough Street towards Elm Street and Main. So that's the public forum. Then, in terms of the business that we've conducted in the planning board, we just had one meeting since our last gathering here, and we completed the site plan review for a new performance barn at the Neshoba Brooks School. So that is looking like a great project. It includes parking lot improvements, exit and entry improvements there. Then we did another study from the MAPC. This time it was about the Walden Street, 59 Walden Street Limited Business District. So this is what used to be the TD Bank building, and it's a building that's stood vacant for some time. And there have been a number of proposals to perhaps change the zoning for that district as the building owners struggled to lease the property. And so we, a couple of years ago at town meeting, did adjust the height to allow for a second story to be built potentially. And then there were various other proposed changes. As a result of neighborhood feedback, we were able to engage the MAPC to do a visual study of the area. And so what they did is they just created a computer model, a 3D computer model that projected different building sites, styles and heights onto the site. And so we were able then to evaluate, okay, well, that would be the impact, and really be able to see it and have the neighbors see it as well. So we continued that, and we will be back to look at that at our next meeting. Interesting, but not a whole lot of business this month.
Thank you. Brian?
The Climate Action Advisory Board met, I think, the day of our last meeting, and our meeting this month has been pushed to March 3rd because of member schedules. But we continue to work on our climate action plan. We are making good headway on doing that, and we're going to keep
Is your
working.
committee planning to take a position on the fossil fuel warrant article?
Yeah, so at our March 3rd meeting, we're going to review some of the warrant articles. And then at our following meeting on the 18th is going to be focused on our plan preparations. But the meeting before town meeting, we will make a position on any articles we feel we need to.
Good. Thank you. Wally?
Our sort of biggest task ahead of us right now is budget prep for town meeting. Two budgets for the both districts. We've got a warrant article for parking at the high school, and we've got our typical capital article for the Concord Public Schools that rides along with the town manager's budget. There is a meeting a week from tonight, a week and a half, I guess it's next Thursday. Middle school building sort of public hearing, kind of update on what's going on. There won't be much leading up to town meeting because there really isn't, other than stabilization fund, there's not going to be anything related to that. The town meeting, that'll come later in the year. They're working furiously on that. We did have a tragic event a couple of weeks ago at the high school, and the community response to that has been overwhelming. And, both within Concord and the support we got from surrounding towns was heartening. And, it's raised awareness on some things, the high school, which is probably beneficial. Unfortunate way to get there, but so we're sort of trying to make sure we utilize that to do some positive things. And I think that's it, unless anybody's got questions.
Thank you. Keith? Morning.
The Affordable Housing Trust Study Committee is presenting it for the public hearing on Monday night. We're finalizing our PowerPoint presentation tonight, and some of us are signed up for a workshop that's being offered next month that where the Mass Housing Partnership is looking at how housing trusts and community preservation committees can work together. So that's one of our important goals for the trustees.
I'm Peter Lowe at Housing Development Corporation. Pinch hitting. The biggest thing we're working on is the Junction Village tax increment financing warrant article. For those of you who are in the housing arena, affordable housing, I advise you to start looking at it because we're going to need to sort of drum up some support for that for annual town meeting. The developer has always put aside $75,000 towards paying for taxes or other costs for the town. It's been in their pro forma since the beginning. And it got a rude awakening from the assessor on what the value of their property is. And they need to, so they've come forward with a tax increment financing program for 20 years because they're creating 30 jobs as part of the assisted living facility that they're proposing. And they will basically earmark the $75,000 for the town each year over the 20 years. And they need that in order to make the project feasible at this point. So there's a good piece at the selectmen's meeting February 10th, about 28 minutes in, or 23 minutes in, and the applicant goes through and sort of makes his case and answers the questions the selectmen fielded at that point. I'd advise folks to take a look at that, and that's what we're focusing on at this point as we prepare for annual town meeting.
That's on the selectmen's agenda for Monday as well as the trust committee. Greg?
By the way, what's the delta? What is the tax? What would be the tax liability?
I think it's like 147,000.
No, it's higher. It's
Higher
about
than-
180.
180.
180,000. So essentially, the TIF is the tax incentive financing is part of a development law that the Commonwealth has passed, and it allows a town to apply to the Commonwealth to essentially reduce the assessed value of the property. And as you reduce the assessed value of the property, of course, you reduce the tax liability. And this would be in effect for 20 years, and then after 20 years, they would have paid down the mortgage that they're taking on the property, which is an $8 million mortgage, pay that down, refinance it, have enough cash then to pay the actual tax liability going forward. So that's the
That's the
general
thought.
Thank you. Natural resources, we continue to have 4 to 6 issues every meeting, and I guess the big news that interests me is that we'll have 2 vacancies at the end of the town meeting. So we're looking for 2 new members. So please, if somebody's interested or knows somebody that might be interested, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, great. And I suppose that goes for everybody, you know, if you've got vacancies coming up on your committee, please be in touch with your liaison. If you know good candidates for it, bring it to their attention so we can get it on our agenda and we don't go through June with a bunch of vacancies, especially on the committees that have regulatory responsibility.
Quick question on that. If we're expecting vacancies, but we want to reduce the size of our committee, what's the process for changing the charter to reduce?
Was it a select board appointed committee?
I believe so,
Then
yeah.
you have to come to the select board and ask them to revise the charter.
Rick Eifler, Concord Housing Authority. We don't have any members coming up for election this spring, but we do have one member who's running for school committee, so there would be a chance that we would have a vacancy right after elections.
Yep.
I think that one thing I wanted to add, it does bring up sort of the way the process of the green cards works. I just wanted to, it seems to me that last time I looked into it, the green cards don't really ask about housing authority because it's a separately elected board.
It's an elected board.
And it's not appointed by the selectmen, but it is actually very often that the select board appoints members to fill vacant seats at the housing authority. The seats run for 5 years, which is a long time. Board members don't often make it for the 5 years, or if they do and get reelected, they often don't make it through the next 5 years. There's also my seat, which is the governor's appointed seat, which the governor doesn't pay much attention to and usually depends on the select board to just say who they
You
want.
and I have a little
So maybe,
chat, see if we can,
my only point being, is there a way to
yeah,
fiddle with the green card process so that the housing authority becomes something that is something someone could say they're interested in?
got it.
Other than that, we continue to work on our everything we've been working on already. We have bathroom projects at the Everett Garden expansion, which is the elderly units that are off of Everett Street. There are 20 units that are changing tubs to showers. Projects like that turn into a big project because it involves a plumbing change, a drain line change, so there's juggling of tenants. Each time one bathroom gets done, 2 tenants have to move out for a day and then move back in and repeat that through 10 times through the project. So that's a bit of a juggle. The Giroux Land Commonwealth Avenue project, the town manager, we met with the town manager last month, and it looks like, I mean, I've said this before probably, that the state is going to sign off, the final sign off on the crossing of the Bruce Freeman Trail necessary to access the park, the Giroux Park, so that we could build our little house. And when that happens, we'll hopefully get a letter from the town manager or from the town or from the select board or from whoever is appropriate that talks about the understanding on how the 20-foot easement would be used, because that conflicts a little bit with having a house there. So we need some sort of a letter of intent about the way the easement would be used by the town over the next so many years as the Bruce Freeman Trail crossing is used instead of that easement. So that's kind of the what's going on there. And I guess that is about it.
Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Akers-Moore, Zoning Board, my first chair meeting. Very excited to be here. Hello. Business as usual for us. We have our big thing right now is PRD, 1440 Main Street. We have reviewed the planning board's recommendation and are now reaching out to town council for some advice, mainly about relief asked for some height requirements. So we will be waiting to hear back from that. So we're continued at least for another month on that one. Other than that, we've been reviewing the planning board warrant articles and seeing if we have any positions on those. We also will be discussing that at our next meeting, and I think that is it. So.
John Kratzley, the chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee. We have our public hearing with the Select Board and the FinCom on the 16th of March. Dean knows, we did make a preliminary presentation to the FinCom on February 6th. Questions were in the following area. We have 10 proposed grant applications, funding applications. Questions came up from the FinCom on the historic preservation proposals for building changes, building improvements in 2 religious organizations. I was able to hand out to the FinCom the opinion of town council that on the various tests of our state Supreme Judicial Court, town council's opinion is these historic preservation building improvement grants fall on the favorable side of those 3 tests. So I gave that to the FinCom. Other questions that came up for our 10 applications were on Giroux Park improvements, and there were questions about Minuteman National Park sidewalk improvements. Those seem to be those are the major questions, and we're taking those to heart and getting prepared for the public hearing.
Just as a quick summary, what's the total allocation that you?
Total allocation is $1,960,000 distributed among 10 different projects and distributed as required by law between community housing, historic preservation, open space, and recreation.
Thank you, Eric. You can't do that.
Can't do that.
By law, we can't do
But
that.
you,
If we leave it cracked.
leave it crack.
That was in college.
Leave it crack.
That was the college rule.
Jean, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Jean Goldsberry, Commission on Disabilities. We've been talking about the census and making sure that people with disabilities are able to access the census and reply to the census to make sure that everyone gets counted. we're concerned about the middle school accessibility, and we've met with CPAC on that. I think they're very active in taking part in the middle school building meetings, and we're trying to also focus on not just accessibility for the students, which is very important, but also accessibility for staff, for visitors, for families who might come to the school, or for the public in general if we're talking about a large meeting space at the new middle school. We also are over the last couple of meetings, or maybe 3 meetings, we've talked about ways to try to reach out more to businesses in the community which are in older buildings, they're grandfathered in, that are not accessible, but trying to see if we can be supportive to the businesses in those buildings to help them be able to offer their services or their products more accessibly to people in the community who have disabilities. That's a whole additional customer base potentially for businesses. We continue to work with or talk with the Library Corporation around the parking, accessible parking, with the new potential new addition to the library, and there's still some possible alternatives that we're talking with them about. And with spring coming soon, we'll be working again on the accessible bike project that we started working with a group from the town of Acton last year to provide accessible bikes for children and adults with disabilities. Now that we've got the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail open, there's ample place where people can safely bike off street, and we want to make sure that people who want to do that are able to.
Paul Cook, Cemetery Committee. Aaron McCloskey has been our superintendent for 6 months. He's doing a very good job. He took some innovative steps to prevent erosion. And Tish Hopkins, who's the cemetery supervisor, is probably the hardest working town employee I know. And she's been on that job for over 30 years. We have 3 big projects we're working on. One is to put all of the cemetery records, make them all electronic. Right now they're all on handwritten cards, which is kept in a safe place, but not the most secure way to have them. So that is a priority. We're also working on finalizing steps to put 4 new mausoleum plots up for sale in the cemetery. The last time a new mausoleum was put in was in 1930, the Pope tomb, which is the only one in the cemetery at the moment. And we are also in the process of repairing scores of broken headstones. We have a project to solicit bids to do that. And we had a controversy regarding bicycles on the unpaved trails in the cemetery. And we had 2 different sides arguing very forcefully for their points of view. We decided to allow the cemetery superintendent to referee that and not get involved unless he needed to. So the question is still whether something to do with what we're going to eventually do regarding protecting the unpaved trails from the kind of use which makes them less accessible to people walking in the cemetery on unpaved trails. The whole area behind the cemetery is not used for graves right now. It's a very beautiful landscape. There's a pond and some swamp, but there's a couple of bike trails through there, and so we are charged with, we're responsible for what goes on those trails. And that's all that's going on in the cemetery.
Is the new mausoleum in the old cemetery?
Yes, that's correct. Right next to the Pope tomb. We did some survey. There's room for 4 new plots of exactly the same size as the one the Pope tomb occupies. And we hope to put those, have a town meeting, have a public hearing for rates sometime this spring, and then put them up for sale. The income from those sales will do a lot to help us repair a lot of broken tombstones in the cemetery.
Good, thank you.
Scott Hopkinson for the Public Access Television Advisory Committee, PAC, which works with the Minuteman Network. We see a couple things. First of all, I think we have one committee member who's coming up for renewal in May this year on that front.
Carla?
I don't believe it's Carlin, but I'll have to check. Okay. We have a chance to review the budget. Just a quick note on the Minuteman Network side. They've hired a station manager. I think we're at now 5 full-time equivalents. They've got their budget out that we're taking a look at. There is some discussion about having an auxiliary station set up at one of the middle schools. I think that's an open subject that they're working on. Again, just a reminder to the select board, we had asked for some guidance on our role relative to budget versus content. We're continuing to work the best we can, mostly focusing on content and support on that side. Up till now, that's still an open issue. Occasionally we get inquiries from folks that visit asking questions about the 2018 warrant article that said that the town would not run the public access television. I've been looking for some information from the town manager on that front, which I have yet to receive, just a comment on that front as well. We'd like to be able to give something to anybody that visits our committee when they ask those questions. Here's the ruling. My understanding is there was a legal ruling that said that was an advisory thing, and so we're still looking for that. And that's about it.
Right. Henry, are you just visiting or?
Just visiting.
Thank you.
So far.
Kathy Gother from the Ag Committee. We're working on our spring forum, which will be March 24th, and it's called What's Growing in Concord, 10 years. From this year was a documentary done on farms, and we are doing a retrospect of what's happened in that 10 years and what's the future of farming in Concord. I would also urge the select board or whoever in town to make a campaign on the green cards to fill vacancies. I think I have felt that it's not promoted enough in the town, and people might have an interest, but they don't know what to do about it. So I think if in the next few months we could get some kind of campaign going, it would be helpful.
Thank you.
It would also be nice if there was some way for citizens to know where the vacancies were on the committees. That way, when they apply for their green card, they know there's some positions available.
Peter Nobley, Historic Districts Commission. I think our news, the biggest thing is we have a neighborhood up by White Pond, Jenny Dugan Road, which is interested in becoming a historic district, so that's going to be a process to develop that. The whole neighborhood seems, well, most of the neighborhood seems to be in favor of that, so we're working on that. And we do have 1.5 vacancies. We've got somebody who I think is going to step on board, especially looking for architects. So if you know any architects who are willing to stand in the line of fire, send them our way. But that's it for us.
Ellen Quackenbush, the Personnel Board. We are putting Article 6 in the town warrant, which is going to transfer the Personnel Board from a board that executes the personnel bylaw to be an advisory board. So we're actually going to be giving up 3 people. So we're going from 6 people to 3 to be an advisory board, and the town manager will take over the responsibility of class and comp. And it's much, actually I'll read what it says in the town bylaw in terms of the warrant, in terms of the reason, because I think it's really well done. Amy Foley did this. The proposed reassignment of authority will support a personnel system that is efficient, responsive to changing operational needs, employment law, workforce trends, effective for recruitment and retention of employees, and consistent with a strong town manager form of government. So we, at town meeting, we were going to move from a board that's attending here to an advisory board, assuming it passes, which I think it will.
Carol Ann Hannon, Council on Aging Board. Our board has actually not met since the last chair breakfast. So the only thing I had to report is that the COA got a grant of $1,000 to start their patient navigation program earlier than they expected.
Good.
That's it.
Eric Van Loon, Tax Relief Committee. We are very pleased and gratified that the Select Board has put a warrant article on the town meeting that would eliminate the sunset clause, which is part of the tax relief for seniors, the means tested one. So we're very much in supportive of that and thankful for it. And at least as best as we can tell from our information, the financial impact on the town is unlikely to be dramatic, but that's up to the Finance Committee. On the other hand, I'm disappointed to report that I have that the promised information of the total amount of contributions which came from our solicitation letter last fall, which was supposed to have been provided yesterday. I think the combination of the holiday and work on the hallway here prevented that from coming forth. So we'll have that next month.
Thank you. John?
I'll just give the cake, Mr. Chairman.
Glad somebody is.
Speaking the truth.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions folks have? Thank you all very much. We'll see you at the March Chairs Breakfast.